At a victory rally in New York City, organized to celebrate the acquittal of Joseph Ettore and Arturo Giovannitti, were two strike leaders of the 1912 textile workers' strike in Lawrence, Massachusetts. Haywood, also a leader of that strike, was accused of saying, "Well, direct action is the shortest way home. It is the surest way, particularly for women and children, the black man, and especially the disenfranchised American working man. And I believe in sabotage, that much misunderstood word. There is no revolutionary action that can be too strong if we will only throw the capitalist class back. The jails all over the country are filled with many of the working class this very day. But they are not filled with the political socialists. They are filled with the men and women socialists of the industrial workers of the world." Haywood was an advocate of labor action, direct action, and sabotage. But this did not necessarily mean encouraging workers to violence. I mean, the UAW, some of the militants advocated sabotage, right? When you say work to rule, that's really that's sabotage. That doesn't mean you're going to throw a bomb. In fact, during the Lawrence strike, and I think that's the bread and roses strike, which a lot of us have heard about, the violence was almost eliminated when Haywood and Ettore took charge of the strike. Shortly thereafter, Haywood was removed from the National Committee of the SP. Eugene Debs, while a critic of what he viewed as the tactics of the anarchists, opposed the removal. Amongst the charges and complaints against Haywood was that he opposed political action, which was odd since he was one of the party's most vigorous campaigners in earlier presidential elections. And he was also the party's candidate for governor in 1906. I think that was in Colorado, but I'm not sure. Big Bill Haywood would later comment, "The history of the IWW has shown the significance of political action. While there are some members who decry legislative and congressional action and who refuse to cast a ballot for any political party, yet the IWW has fought more political battles for the working class than any other labor organization or political party in America," of course up to that time. "They have had one battle after another for free speech. They have fought against vagrancy laws, against criminal syndicalism laws, and to establish the right of workers to organize. They have gone on strike for men in prison. It is to the ignominy of the Socialist Party and the Socialist Labor Party that they have seldom joined forces with IWW in these desperate political struggles." The IWW hit hard against racism. It attacked the Jim Crow system in the South. It urged all workers to join one big union, regardless of race, color, or creed, and also gender. The IWW even had an impact internationally. In 1910-1911, the Industrial Workers Union of South Africa, which was affiliated with the IWW at the time, organized black and white workers into the same union in South Africa. It led a strike of what they called trainway men in Johannesburg, in which black and white workers united in struggle for the first time. The Wobblies were also known for their free speech fights. They would go onto the streets to organize. Typically, a Wobbly would open a speech with 4 simple words: "Fellow workers and friends," and they would immediately get arrested. This happened in cities all across the country. The free speech fights were engaged also by the Socialist Party, the Socialist Labor Party, and other groups. But the Wobblies were best known for this. In city after city, ordinances were passed at the urging of company owners to stifle working class speech, but the workers fought back, filling jails and forcing the repeal of many of these laws. What would happen is the first Wobbly would get arrested, the next one would get arrested, until they couldn't put any more in jail. And then they continued to organize, and eventually a lot of these laws were struck. I want to talk about someone I ran across. His name is Ben Fletcher. He wasn't really a socialist, but he was a leading organizer of the IWW. He was also an African American. And he's considered by some to be one of the greatest labor leaders of the first part of the 20th century. He led the Marine Transport Workers Local 3, which was organized the longshore workers in Philadelphia. It was first organized in 1913, and it was the largest, most powerful, and longest-lasting interracial union of this period. Prior to 1913, labor organizing on the Philadelphia docks was frustrated by the boss's ability to pit black and white dock workers against each other. The IWW showed up and pointed out that whether the black and white workers liked each other, their only hope was to form one union. The union leadership even rotated. One month, a black worker would be the local chairperson. The next month, a white worker would be the chairperson. When the U.S. entered World War I, Philadelphia was one of the most important ports for the war effort. Although the local engaged in only one work stoppage, and it was for only one day, and it was also an annual event, it always had a one-day work stoppage on its anniversary, founding anniversary. The local leaders, including Ben Fletcher, were arrested during the national raids on the IWW. Fletcher was sentenced to 10 years at Leavenworth, and his release became a celebrated cause among African-American radicals, including A. Philip Randolph. Fletcher was released in 1922, along with most of the jailed Wobblies. The tension between the left and the center-right factions also manifested itself in the struggle for full rights of women, for women. By 1908, the male superiority complex had increased considerably. Some members of the Socialist Party actually believed that women were inferior to men. The center-right faction seemed to view equality as a gift from men to women. The left wing took this question on as well and organized against male superiority. The center-right views toward women were similar to their views toward African Americans. African Americans were told that their unequal status was part of the general, quote, labor problem, while women were told that their so-called women question was also part of the general labor problem. In 1908, the SP had dues-paying membership of 50,000, but only 2,000 were women. Organized opposition grew rapidly among the socialist women. In 1905, in fact, some women proposed a separate socialist party for women. But by 1908, women members had formed federation, clubs, and leagues in many cities across the U.S. At the 1908 party convention, a committee of 5 women was elected to organize propaganda among women, and by 1910, the socialist women were agitating for universal suffrage, and 156 women's committees were organized in local chapters, and 5 states had statewide committees. So you can see the tension, the backwardness of certain elements of the Socialist Party, which, by the way, is still like that today. The first part of the 20th century saw a number of economic recessions that helped the growth of the Socialist Party. From 1899 to 1900, there was a mild recession with a decline of about 10% in trade and industrial activities. It was followed by another recession, 1902 to 1904, which was triggered by a stock market crash a year earlier. And then there was a panic of 1907, which led to a 30% drop in trade and industrial activity. It was this economic crisis that led to a series of laws that ultimately resulted in the creation of the notorious Federal Reserve in 1913. Then there was a panic of 1910 through 1911, which resulted in deflation and a drop in trade and industrial activity of 10%. And then this was followed by another recession in 1913 through 1914, where industrial activity declined by 20%. In this period, however, the Socialist Party was becoming a mass party of the working class. At the same time, several notable African-American labor and socialist leaders and preachers emerged. I will go over first the role of African-American religious leaders in the Socialist Party and the socialist movement of the early 1900s. Several leaders, Reverend Richard Ewell, Reverend George Washington Woodbey, and Reverend George Slater, through their writings and speeches, did more to introduce the black community to socialism than all of the various publications of the socialist groups combined, because of the dominant role played by the church in the African American community.